Adults of Reddit, what was something you were unprepared for when you first moved out of your parents' house? How much time it really takes to cook your meals? Not having condiments or spices on hand. I took for granted having salt and pepper and whatever spice I needed in the cupboard. Buying all that at once can add up quickly. The amount of depressing things that come in the post bills etc. The cost of food and how fast it goes bad. The amount of small things that needs to be done on everyday basis. Cooking, house cleaning, dishwashing, laundry, etc. And this does not include homework if you are a student, hobbies, personal life. I'm just so tired of all that stuff. Food is so expensive. I moved out a few months ago and that's been the thing I was least equipped to deal with. Don't forget to buy toilet roll. There is no magic toilet fairy despite appearances. You need to actually think about what you want to eat each and every day. I still can't get over it. How much happier I would be. Like 80% of the stuff in our financial and TBH, I had been paying for all my own shit long before I moved out, so none of that was a surprise. Personally, I was unprepared for how lonely I'd be. First time moving out, I lived alone. Man, it gets really lonely. I finally realized why all my friends Tindered so much. Happy things don't just happen. You decide to do them. All those fun events and great memories you had growing up. The birthday parties, beach trips, days you decided to turn the living room into a castle of sheets and cushions. My parents deliberately planned those things, or gave their own time on a whim, because they wanted me to be happy. Even if I'm tired from work, I try to plan fun, silly events and always celebrate holidays, because I realized no one's going to do it for me anymore. Being on my own. If I got sick. I once got food poisoning when my roommate was away for the weekend. Vomiting every 20 to 30 minutes for an entire day. I was severely dehydrated and didn't even have the strength to walk to the drugstore for meds and Gatorade. Come back to a dark, liveless home in the evenings. Since my mom worked 6 am 2 pm until a few years ago, and we lived with my grandparents, there were always someone home when I'd come back from school. Even if we didn't chat, there was someone there, moving around, doing their own things. It sometimes was annoying, because I sometimes was tired and needed peace and quiet. But I underestimate how much reassuring it was. My experience was the opposite of most. I was surprised how little work it was to maintain a single person one bedroom. I was expecting an absolute hell of chores and lack of free time. A lot has to do with decluttering before moving out and adapting a more minimalist lifestyle, but still. Edit. Also, math before moving. Water cost money. I grew up on a farm with well water. It completely blew me away people had to pay for tap water. Years later I feel bad for people in cities that don't provide drinkable water. Our hometown had an oil pipe burst and contaminated their drinking water. Many people came to our farm for drinkable water. The lack of auto refilling cupboards in the kitchen. When I ate all the food, the cupboards just stayed stubbornly empty. At my parents' home they always magically refilled. How alike my mom and I are. I used to tell her to chill with the household chores. She couldn't chill. I can't chill. Must clean. The odd sense of a lack of security going to bed the first few nights. I'm close with my parents, so when I lived at home I always felt a bit safer that they were downstairs when I went up to bed. It was weird when that was gone. Loneliness by far. I loved living by myself, but lying in bed without my cat on my bed, or without hearing my mom laughing downstairs made the room feel very small and secluded. The fact that $100 is no longer a lot of money. Finding a new doctor. Still haven't seen one since I moved out 3 years ago. When something seems to be slightly wrong I just hope that it will get better without seeing a doctor. I'm kind of worried that I'm going to regret this at some point. How hard it is to keep an apartment clean. So much upkeep required. The loneliness. It's so eerily quiet right now. I'm playing random music, random tracks from Undertale or Half-Life, music just to distract from it. I used to love being alone when I was surrounded by people 90% of the time, but now years of it has been depressing. I miss family. Maybe not my family, but people you live with. Life is just cleaning, cooking every so often, going to work, sleeping, and maybe an occasional fun thing that you just barely enjoy. Nothing happens unless you alone scrape up the will power to do it, and sometimes you just have to be like a robot to keep going. How wrong my idea of independence was. Sure, you can do whatever you want whenever you want, but almost every activity generates waste in some capacity that you need to deal with. Also, if you have a full-time job, having to forego hanging out with friends that don't. Sorry guys, I can't hang out until 2 AM on Tuesday to play video games anymore. Gotta be up at 6. The peace and quiet. Literally everything about life and the real world. They would always tell me to do or don't do things with zero explanation or advice backing up why they wanted me to do / not do those things. I grew up Mormon. The freedom. The fact that I could go out without hearing, "Where are you going? It's 11 o'clock." Or waking up at noon on Saturday because I had a few drinks Friday night and watched TV until I was damn well good and ready to go to bed. Not having to explain what I was doing. Cleaning up the place when I felt like it and not one fucking minute before. Married with 2 teenagers now, and I'm doing the exact same things to them that my parents did. And I realize that they weren't the hovering control freaks that I thought they were. They were just parents. Judgment for being frugal. Until I lived with people who had well-off parents, I hadn't realized there was a stigma for using the cheap grocery store or the cheap ground meat or the right tomatoes or healthier broccoli. I wasn't prepared to have food I made outright rejected due to where I shopped. I also assumed that everyone learned a thing or two about using a screwdriver and hammer and at least had sense enough to look up how to repair things. Vacuum stopped sucking, and my roommate's solution was to buy a new one next time they went home for the weekend. I did a search on YouTube, cleared out the filter, and it worked once more. I also built my roommate's IKEA bookshelf while she kind of just stood to the side. Having to set up all my own appointments and services. Regular dish soap is not the same as dishwasher soap. I flooded my first apartment kitchen with bubbles, lots and lots of bubbles, along with generally how much money and work it takes to keep up. Buying light bulbs, seriously, it never occurred to me that I would need to replace them on occasion. And there are quite a few types. The first ones I bought were about as bright as the sun. Credit checks. I thought I would have been able to find an apartment easy. Nope. And that you have to sometimes pay a deposit, last and current month's rent, and make a certain amount to even get considered. I remember one complex made it a requirement to have apartment insurance or something like that. Money management. First month was very difficult as I didn't know how to assign certain expenses. Threw a party first week and pretty much spent everything. Had to survive on my savings. How scary getting hurt is when you're by yourself. If you cut your finger badly by accident, you're the only who's there to help. It was so much easier than I expected. My parents made me feel I was generally incompetent and too irresponsible to live on my own. Finally moved out and was amazed that I could keep my place clean, cook, and handle finances on my own. Fast forward 30 years, I'm doing freaking really well. I planned to make chocolate chip cookie dough and eat the entire batch. Turns out there was a reason my parents hadn't allowed that. I couldn't look at cookie dough for a couple years after that. I really am an adultier adult. Dealing with roommates and their immaturity. I didn't drink, and she wanted to get wasted regularly. Nothing, really. When I moved out, I was kind of surprised how nothing changed. I would sit on the computer all the same, wash my clothes and dishes all the same. The only thing that changed was having to buy food, but it was kind of automatic. It's just easily cooked stuff. How to do taxes. Renting. One tip I can give is when you move in and fill out the entry report, be as absolutely thorough as you can. Take the time to fully inspect everything and write it down on the entry report. Even the tiniest of marks, stains and any other damage that is present when you move in. And take photos. Photograph everything and keep those photos safe. Real estates will try to blame you for everything they can take you for when you move out, so that they and the owners don't have to pay for repairs. Cover your ass. how good it actually feels to be away from family while at the same time missing them and the place you lived in terribly. I didn't live with my parents, but you get the picture. I'm gonna say everything. People whose parents didn't prepare them for life unite. But the worst part was learning how quickly you can go into debt when you're spending money with credit cards and never checking your account. That was an expensive lesson. Cooking, I guess. It's not particularly hard to cook some basic meals, but at first it took me a while to figure out what was affordable to cook, what was quick, etc. Also laundry. It's not difficult, but man is it boring and exhausting. I've had 4 bags of clean clothes just sitting in my room for the past week, taking up way too much space, but I just couldn't bring myself to put them away. Finally did most of it today, and I do feel better for it. Makes me feel kinda shitty knowing my mum did that for me every week for 18 years, on top of doing the same for my sister, herself and my dad. I left home 4 years ago, and I still don't know how to sort out utilities etc. because I'm living with a bunch of students and I just wasn't the one who ended up sorting that out. I graduate and move into my own place in a couple of months, so I'm sure I'll have some more learning to do then. I was unprepared for the realization that I was not the person causing all the problems in the house I grew up in. I had a place all my own, alone. Every bit of trash in the apartment was mine. If it was in the trash can, I put it there. If it was on the floor, it was my fault. My apartment was cleaner than the house I grew up in. Because I wasn't the person making the messes I had been blamed for growing up. I ate better than at any other point in my life because I was buying my own food and preparing it and enjoying it without being criticized for my meal choice. Don't get me wrong. I made mistakes, burned a few meals, forgot to take out the trash a few times, skipped laundry day more than once. But all of that was on me, and me, alone, was better than living at home with family. Talking to the neighbors. We lived in the countryside, where you could be as introverted as you wanted to be. Unfortunately my new community is near a major university and it's teeming with sociologists big on neighborliness and combating the evils of social isolation. Ultimately, I was unprepared for life outside of a toxic environment. US recent grad, how expensive a trip to the doctor is even with insurance, minus the free once a year preventative visit. Also, how expensive insurance is. I see why a lot of adults avoid their doctor/dentist until absolutely necessary now. Dishes. They suck. How much of my money went to rent? I was unprepared for the sheer amount of bills that I had to pay on a minimum wage job. How much of my paycheck would be taken in taxes, and how expensive the necessities, not so fun, normal stuff of life was. I had only thought about the independence I would be gaining. I was unprepared for the lack of built-in company and advisors. How much I'd be visiting the pound/euro store equivalents for most of my daily essentials.